The first two Delhi Sultanates were some of the most unstable political times in Indian history. Basically, it was a terrible time for all people involved, not just the commoners but even the rulers. To illustrate this point of how unstable their rule was, you just have to look at the fact that Muhammad Ghori's invasion ended in 1206, and as he was returning back to Ghazni, where he came from, he got assassinated by his own most trusted slaves. They were the only people he trusted as his family. Now, there were multiple claimants for different parts of his empire. To the west, around Ghazni and modern day Afghanistan, a different dynasty took over, and in between Lahore and Delhi, a different dynasty took over, and towards the east, a third different dynasty took over called the Khiljis. In fact, it's this Khilji dynasty of Bengal that ordered the burning of the Nalanda University, and not the Khilji dynasty in which Alauddin Khilji was the second king. The chief among them was the Mamluks. It was founded by Qutb-ud-din Aibak, who was one of the former slaves of Muhammad Ghori. He is not the one who assassinated him, by the way. Now, after Muhammad Ghori died, there was possibly a civil war or a diplomatic spat. We are not 100% sure of this, but somehow, after competition between his three main slaves and slave generals, Qutb-ud-din Aibak became the emperor, although he continued to mint coins under Ghori's name. It took him until 1209 AD, or 3 years into his reign, until he was recognized as a separate entity or the king of his own kingdom, or the Delhi Sultanate, by the nephew of Muhammad Ghori, who had taken over the power in Ghazni. Only for my man Qutb to die 1 year after being recognized from falling off a horseback while playing a game similar to polo. This is almost as funny as Humayun dying because he fell down a set of stairs in his own library. This is actually tragic because he was an incredibly kind king. He did not conquer, he only built and consolidated. He was fair in his ruling and he was very charitable, even to the locals. His soldiers did not forcibly take stuff from the people except for law-mandated taxes, which were fairly low. There are some accounts of him enslaving people when he raided Gujarat and some other spots in India, but they have more or less been debunked by later historians. Bro beat all the allegations for 4 years. Because the moment he died, he didn't have any successors. The nobles in Lahore, which was their second capital, elected Aram Shah as his heir. Who is Aram Shah? Who knows, man? Who knows? Anyway, he left the throne with the same obscurity as he was elected. Since people started rebelling against his appointment 8 months into his reign, he had to be deposed of. The leading general and also a slave of the Afar boy Qutb named Iltutmish was invited to be the Sultan. This caused there to be a civil war between the two factions, and Iltutmish won. What happened to Aram Shah? Who knows, man? Who knows? The moment that Iltutmish came to power, the first thing he did was order a beheading of everyone who betrayed him. And for the first 5 years of his reign, he spent as a subordinate to the Sultan of Ghazni in the west, which is where the Ghurid Empire came from. In this time, he built up his forces and ensured his control over his region. And then he decided to break free. This caused another battle of Tarain, the same place Prithviraj Chauhan and Muhammad Ghori had clashed twice before. In this, Iltutmish won and got his independence for his kingdom of Delhi Sultanate. From here, he reigned for the next 20 years. Finally, some stability. Stability is not always a good thing, especially when you have a villain on the throne. His reign is marked with two things: war and expansion. He spread his empire in every direction, from eastward into Bengal and westward into Rajasthan and even Sindh. The most fascinating thing about this time period was that it coincided with the rise of the Mongol Empire. In 1220, the Mongols had completely destroyed the Khwarezm Empire. It was a Central Asian empire that usually caused trouble in western Indian provinces. With their destruction, two things happened. One, there was less claimants on the land west of Indus River, and two, a lot of them poured into India and into Punjab specifically, trying to rule the land. And they were successful for a while too, but after some time, the local kings and Iltutmish allied together to drive them away. Alliances in India, that's a rare thing. Fun fact, the Mongols led by Genghis Khan did try to invade India. They besieged Multan, but they left because the weather was too hot. Now, with the withdrawal of the Mongols and the death of the Khwarezm Empire, it allowed Iltutmish to conquer kingdoms around the Indus and westwards. He even conquered Bengal and eastern India from Khiljis. As a person, Iltutmish was a devout Muslim. He stuck to his 5 prayers a day, no matter what. He even gave prayer breaks to his armies while marching, but because of his devotion, he was also a fanatic. He wanted to bring Sharia law to the empire and offer the choice to the Hindus to die or convert. His advisors wisely advised against it because there were too few Muslims and too many Hindus, and if he had offered something like that, there might have been rebellion. Cooler heads prevailed here. Could you have imagined what the hell would have happened if there weren't cooler heads here? There was a succession crisis after his death in 1236. Since his eldest son had died in 1229, he didn't have an heir apparent for 2 years after his eldest son's death. But in 1231, he saw his daughter Razia take charge of the administration of the empire as he went in a campaign to Gwalior. Impressed by her skills, he elected her as his heir. But at his deathbed, he changed his mind. He named his second son, Ruknuddin Firuz, as his heir apparent. But he was too young to govern, so basically it was run by his mother, who then beheaded the third son as to make sure that there is no competition. The third son was by another woman, of course. This caused a rebellion in the empire. The rebellion got successfully hijacked by Razia, and she overthrew her brother and her stepmother. For 4 years, the Delhi Sultanate had a woman for its sultan. She was even called Razia Sultan. This wasn't acceptable to the nobles at the time, of course, so in 4 years she was also deposed of. I mean, she did lose almost all of Rajasthan and the eastern half of her empire in rebellion. So I mean, it makes sense why she got overthrown. But that wasn't the reason. The real reason was that at the beginning she stuck with the Islamic tradition of parda, which was that she hid herself behind a screen when she went in audience of the people and the nobles, and she was surrounded by female guards. But with time she started behaving more and more like a man. She would stop observing parda, she would step out wearing a man's clothing, she would even sit on the back of elephants to interact with people outside her castle. She even started actually interacting with the locals, which was unheard of by this point. She started to elect non-Turkic people into her close circle. All of this put together made the Turkic nobles feel threatened. Of course, it was going to be something stupid like that. Her successor, or her younger brother, was also deposed of within 2 years of him taking the throne, since he too continued to elect non-Turkic people into the court. He was then followed by Ruknuddin's son, Alauddin Masood. He too was overthrown within 4 years of him taking the throne, since he lost even more land to rebellion. This is so chaotic. Hey, that's the title of this video. Finally, the revolving door of sultans ended with Iltutmish's other grandson, his name Nasiruddin Muhammad, or Muhammad I of Delhi. But the chaos didn't stop. This man didn't actually rule the Delhi Sultanate. Instead, he spent his time doing better things like praying and copying Quran, as you do. The real power sat with his father-in-law, Ghiyasuddin Balban, who in 1265 stopped all pretense and took the throne for himself. As a vizier, he reconquered Bengal for the third time. He destroyed the Mayos, which was a Muslim minority from Mewat, who were raiders and they kept attacking Delhi. And he even repelled the Mongols for a second time, once again because India was too hot for them. Relatable. When he dropped all pretense and became the emperor, he brought great reforms. He created a court of spies that made sure that any talk of attack or rebellion was nipped in the bud. He was so austere that his court did not know any laughter, only seriousness. He was so fair that he even persecuted nobility for their crime. He even persecuted nobilities when they mistreated their slaves. On the other hand, he caused mass conversions to Islam in Punjab at the threat of violence at a scale that it had never been seen before. So sometimes you're just a bad person. After his death was another succession crisis, which was stopped by his general Jalaluddin Khalji overthrowing his dynasty and starting the Khalji dynasty 3 years after his death. Overall, the Mamluk dynasty may have ruled for 90 odd years, but it was also chaotic. There was a mess. The Khilji dynasty, with all of two emperors, isn't all that better. In fact, it might have been worse. Jalaluddin Khilji was assassinated by his own nephew 6 years after he came to his throne. Jalaluddin was going to meet Ali or Alauddin Khilji, his nephew, on a boat on Ganga, and it is said that as he stopped and got off his boat, Alauddin Khilji bent down to touch his feet like the locals, and while he did that, his slave, Alauddin Khilji's slave, Malik Kafur, struck him down twice. Once he struck him down and he survived, and he tried to run away back to his boat, but the second time, the Malik Kafur chased him down and struck him down, finally to kill him. And as he died, Alauddin Khilji proclaimed himself the next emperor of the dynasty. He deserves his own video. Even though he only reigned for 20 years, it was an eventful 20 years. So, well, we'll see you next time in the next video about Alauddin Khilji.